And what I see is I see a lot of communication books talking about what you say and how you say it. And while there's nothing wrong with those are great books. I think in lasting relationship, what actually matters is our why and our who.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Something New Show. We are doing part 2 today with Jason VanRuler, that is visiting from out of town, America's leading therapist, and we are having some really great conversation today. I'm super glad that we have time to record a second part
It's been great.
to this, because what you've been sharing today has been so helpful, not just for our listeners, but also for me. And I want to say thank you for that. And as we head into this next topic, we are so grateful for the hours and hours of work you've done to study communication in relationships. And I know that this wasn't just a flippant project for you. If you had to say how many years you've been working on this new
My
release,
whole life. Probably
your
just
whole
my
life.
whole life. Yeah.
Just your whole life.
Just my whole life.
No big
Not
deal.
that long. Yeah.
No big deal. But you've kind of taken all your research and time with clients to narrow down communication
Yep.
into 5 different ways to feel loved in communication. Is that what you would say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so for me, I don't know what it is about me. Maybe you can relate, but I'm always like, how do we do it faster, better, more efficiently? I'm always looking at things that way. And so getting to work with a ton of couples and teams, I'm just like, could this be done faster? And could it be done better and faster? And so what I've tried to kind of figure out based on all my experience and research and things like that is just like, how do we really go deep fast and connect with somebody at a heart level? Because what I found is if you connect there, what you say isn't even as important. You know, what's really interesting is if you look back at like historical figures and amazing speakers, they weren't always the most eloquent or well-read. They were people who connected with your heart. And so that really spurred me to kind of say, well, what is the science of that? And how do we figure out how to do it for ourselves?
Okay. And so what did you find out?
Well, I didn't find out anything. I hope to figure it out someday. No, I'm just kidding you. Well, what I found out is that there are really 5 kind of predictable communication types that people have, and we just communicate in a way that reflects our why, right? So at the end of the day, the thing that matters to most of us is our why and who we are in that process. And what I see is I see a lot of communication books talking about what you say and how you say it. And while there's nothing wrong with those are great books. I think in lasting relationship, what actually matters is our why and our who. And so that's what this book is about, is like, how do we speak to that part in someone else?
The why and the who.
Right.
Speaking to that in them.
Correct.
To their why and their who.
Correct.
Can you tell me more?
Yeah. So the thing is like when you think about depth and emotional depth, there's 4 levels, right? So you have the what. Okay. So the what is, let's say you're married. So the what is I'm married. Okay. The how is how do I approach marriage? Okay. What are my rhythms, my habits, my routines? Okay. Those 2 things are really great and they're good things to connect over, but they're not very emotionally deep. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. But why I do my marriage that way, we're starting to get somewhere, right? So if I say, but why do you do it that way? Or why does it matter to you? Your why brings some depth. And then if I say to you, and who are you becoming in the process of that marriage? Now we've got heart level depth. And so what I wanted to do is create an assessment and a system that help people speak to those 2 things. Because when we talk to that part, we can understand anyone and we can actually have conversations.
Okay. And while we were on the break there, you said in some cases marriages might be going through and up for a renegotiation of their marriage. So before we go into those 5 communication, would you say love languages?
Like a type. Yeah.
A
communication type.
Before we go into like a 5 communication type, just breaking that down for us, could you talk about this renegotiation idea? Because I thought that was fascinating. I've been married 20 years and life looks a lot different than it did when we were newlyweds. And I'm sure anybody listening, no matter how long they've been married, it looks different than when they began. And there were maybe some terms that they were operating under as a couple that need to be up for renegotiation, and that was your conversation at break. You said absolutely a lot of couples are up for that, and it should be happening now.
Mhm.
And so, what does that look like, and what do you mean when you say a renegotiation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're in that spot, congratulations, you've grown,
Okay.
right? Because that only happens because you've grown.
Okay.
Someone has grown. And so things are different now. And so now that things are different, what do we need to do? Who needs to do it? And how's it going to look? I think where couples get stuck is they just try to honor the old way of doing things, even though they're different people.
Hmm.
And it's hard to honor the old way if it no longer makes sense. And so we find people saying, well, I'm loyal, I'm stable, so we're just going to do it the way we did when we first met 20 years ago. Well, the hope is you've found some better ways to do things and you've
You've
grown a little
improved.
bit. Yeah. And so as you've improved, it means we need to renegotiate the relationship. And a lot of times, if you're going to grow often, this is an ongoing process. And so we say, okay, well, now we're renegotiating what our relationship is going to look like. And so I would even say in my marriage, we've been married 19 years. We're Jason Jody 2.0. That's just how it had to be. And some of the things from 1.0 are still around, and some of the things are different because we've grown. And so it's a wonderful thing, but it's kind of a difficult transition to make because you have to talk through some possibly difficult conversations.
And it's not that your commitment has changed. It's just more that um, I mean, at least what I'm hearing you say is like maybe the dynamics of your daily lifestyle, who's doing what, how you communicate, when you connect. Because man, when we connect at 4 kids and 4 businesses later, it's very just limited in the freedom on when that looks like you connect, because now it's like, okay, I have to fit this in
Mhm.
if it's a priority to me instead of going at 100 million miles an hour. And so I think it's really helpful. What would be like a starting point for people that are like, hey, I think I'm going to raise my hand here and say, I'm up for renegotiation with this relationship? What would be some things that they could do? Is, I mean, I'm assuming set aside a conversation time to have with your spouse, but what would they talk about in that meeting?
Yeah, I would say what is working, what's not working, and why. Okay, if we can start with that, we sort of have some common ground to discuss some things. So, what are we doing really well at right now? When we look at our relationship and our life, where are we're doing it exactly how we would want to, and then where are we not? And why do we suspect that's the problem? And then what are some suggestions about what we might do instead?
I could even see this working so well with even in the workplace.
Yeah,
A long tenured work relationship could even be up for a conversation like that. Like what's working really great. We've been together X amount of time, maybe 2 years working together, but what could we improve?
right. And I see this all the time where I'll help someone who's a founder start a business, and I love that season because that season's all about can we just make it work. So it's doing all the things all the time. It's just trying to survive.
Yeah.
But then when we do, and we kind of get out of that, we have to shift our mindset and perspective because the things we did before will actually work against us now, right? It's that old, what got you here won't get you there. And so in relationship, the same principle is true.
So jumping now into the communication types, I mean this could be very much a part of your conversation, right? With the
Right.
renegotiation, you could
Hmm.
be like, "Hey, these are some types of communication that maybe we're lending ourselves to, but my preference would be to move towards this." I'm
Absolutely.
assuming. You got to tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely on the right track.
Episode is sponsored by Something Blue 30A. Looking for the perfect vacation spot to disconnect from everything, put your feet in the softest sand, and enjoy a fresh, renovated 2 bedroom, 2.5 bath townhouse right on the beach in my favorite place in the world? Well, 30A is situated in the panhandle of Florida, and I'd love for you to check out Something Blue 30A on Instagram and make it the perfect place for your next vacation.
So there are 5 types. The P is the peacemaker. Okay. And the peacemaker, they are all about harmony and peace. So their why in communicating is to kind of keep the peace, make sure everyone feels okay and has harmony. The A is the advocate, and the advocate, they're mostly concerned with right and wrong, justice, principles. And so they're the people who are great protectors, right? Because they'll say the thing, they'll advocate for you. Next is the T, the thinker. And the thinker is all about what makes sense logically to them. They don't always take feelings into account into that process, because it's, again, is it making sense with what I think, is right in this situation? The H is the harbor, and the harbor is all about emotional depth and making space for someone to have feelings and emotions, and that's what they care about. And then lastly is the S, or the spark. And the spark is all about great impact, but not a lot of depth, right? So they don't always want to talk about the hard things. They don't want to slow down and have those conversations. They just want to go really, really fast and have a huge scope of work, right? And so if we know that, what we're wired for and what our partner's wired for, we can start to speak differently to them, okay?
I'd like to hear an example.
So a great example is I am a harbor, right? So I'm in the right job because I care an awful lot about feelings and about emotional safety and about, Mindy, are you going to get time to share how you feel with me? And then I just did this wonderful thing because I married a thinker, okay? And Jody's so wonderful, but she leads with thinking and with logic, right? And so I'm all about the feelings. She's all about the thoughts. Do you think that ends badly sometimes for us? Yeah. So what we've had to learn to do is to make space for each other's thought process and the why that we communicate. So if I want to get somewhere with Jody, I know that I need to slow down enough to talk to what she thinks about the situation, provide some facts, provide, kind of a thought process, as opposed to just leading with feeling. Okay? Because if I lead with feeling, she's going to be likely overwhelmed and it's not going to land. Okay. Same with me. If I'm coming home and I'm like, hey, I had this great day or this great meeting and I feel, and it's amazing and I'm so excited. And she's like, well, let's logically talk about how that would work. I don't like that. I'm like, why is this such a buzzkill? I'm talking about how I feel. And she goes, well, practically speaking though, could you do that? Could you do this? And it's like, because we're seeing it two different ways. So the goal of this was to understand kind of what we lead with and what other people lead with so we can speak to that better.
Yeah, I could see this not just working in marriage, but also in the workplace. I was gonna say, how have you seen this with teams or?
Yeah, I didn't know if it would or wouldn't, right? It was, I just thought relationships in general. And then as I've been talking about it, I've had a lot of companies say, can you come do this with our leadership team? Because we're feeling kind of stuck. And when we're stuck, it's almost always that we have some of those polar opposite ones that are trying to lead together. And so if we don't understand that's how the other person's wired, we get really, really stuck. And what happens then is we can take things personally and be really offended by someone else's primary because it's not ours. Right? So for me, if Jody's leading with thoughts and logic when I'm trying to talk about emotions, I can take that really personally, even though it's not personal at all. It's just how she thinks.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I am layering all of that with so many experiences right now.
Yeah. When you see it, you start to see it popping up all over. And then what you'll also see is the people you connect with the easiest are often wired just like you. Right? And so what we do is we sort of create this environment where it's like, yeah, I love that person, or that person's like, well, what's the common thread there? Well, it's usually they have your primary too.
Do you usually marry someone that has the same, or
Of course
you usually
not.
marry your opposite?
Of course not. That would be way too easy. We don't want to do that. We usually marry what we would like to see growth in and what we haven't had.
You're attracted to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I think back to my childhood, it was heavily based on feeling, and that got us in a lot of trouble, right? That actually wasn't a really good thing a lot of times, because if you're too feelings based, you can make really impulsive and reactive decisions, and that's not great. So, unintentionally, I meet this woman and she's a brilliant thinker. And I'm like, that's so amazing. Like, you always think things through. Like, I just sort of feel things and you actually think about them. And I'm like,
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I'm like, that's super attractive. I'm marrying you today. And then you fast forward about a year and I'm like, you're always thinking. You're always thinking. You're not feeling. I don't know if I like that anymore. So we tend to sort of find the thing we needed most. We love it initially, and then we wrestle with it eventually.
How did you do so you created an assessment. Did you just start to analyze some questions that would lead towards, I imagine that was a long process.
Yeah, it took a little while. So I've got a great friend that's really good at building assessments. And so we spent a lot of time kind of talking back and forth about how do we, help people ask some questions in their life and then get directed to what their primary is, and then oftentimes their secondary. And so you'll get a score of kind of, this is where you score highest and this is where you score second. And what you'll find is there's usually overlap in couples between primary, secondary.
Now, your work, you work with both corporate, with teams, with leaders, but then you also work with couples. Would you say you have a specialty, or is it kind of like it's more about the methodologies that apply to all those things?
It's kind of methodologies, but they're one and the same in the sense that they're relationships. It's all about, how do I create a lasting, healthy relationship? And that happens both at work and at home.
So, with the PATH method, it's important not just to know yours, but it's important to know the person that you're working with. And then, are you supposed to communicate in a way that matters to them?
It's easier if you do. Yep. So if you need to share something that's important, it's good to lead with what's going to resonate with them first, as opposed to what's just going to lead with you. Because if you just share your style, so if you're a thinker and you tell, a harbor the thought, you just have to understand, like, that's probably not going to be the most efficient way of communicating. It would be better to start with the feelings and then transition to thoughts and logic after that, because it's how they're going to hear it best.
So interesting. So when will this be available?
This is out in April, so I'm really excited about it.
Okay, well, congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I was going to say, so did you have a lot of people take the assessment before you release it?
Starting to. Yeah.
Starting to.
Yeah, we just put it live. I've been doing a bunch of speaking engagements, and so we're now getting into the 1,000 part, and so it's like I want to have as many people take it as possible, just so that we can really, continue to refine and make it better. That's my goal with all of this, is better relationships more efficiently.
So, in a dream world, what would you define as a healthy relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think a healthy relationship, I usually boil it down to a couple things. It's two people pointed in the same direction, who want to see the other person be healthy and successful, and who are willing to do it differently. The willingness, I think, is not always talked about, but willingness in a relationship is really the secret sauce. If someone is willing to do it differently, you got almost enough to go on to have the healthiest relationship.
Can we talk a little bit about parent-child relationship?
Sure.
Because I imagine that first of all, there's conflict in any kind of relationship. But in some regards, a lot of the relationships we're talking about were chosen, right? They were chosen workplaces. They were chosen partners in business. They were chosen spouses in marriage. But children, you got what you got.
Got what you got.
And what I mean by that is they got us, regardless of whether they chose it or not. We got them. And of course, we absolutely love our children. But there can be a different dynamic with the fact that this was a gifted by God relationship and not a choice. And so what are some things that you could say, some recommendations for parents to kids to building healthy relationships, but then also kids to parents to build healthy relationships, to stay in good standing instead of ending up with estrangement, because that's the last thing we want. It's very much the last thing. So I'm just thinking, if we still have kids at home, there's still hope in building those strong ties. And what would you say would be helpful in those regards?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of estrangement comes from a refusal to accept differences. That's, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? Most parental estrangement is, I'm confronting a parent about a hurt or a wound that I have. I'm asking for acknowledgement and validation, and they're unwilling to give it. That's usually how that starts. And so if you boil that down, what that's really about is, I'm not allowing you to be different than I am. And so I think I was a great parent and you don't, and I don't allow the difference. And so one of the things we need to think about in parental relationships, or any relationship, is making space for people to see it differently. And that's really hard, because sometimes people have a wildly different perspective than we do. And it's hard when it's kids, because you go, well, I thought I taught you all of these things, or I told you how it was. And they go, well, I still saw it this way. But what's true about us is, we all have our own perspective. When you think about eyewitness testimony, 100 people can watch the same event. They can be asked about it a week later, and you get 90 different answers. Okay. Parenting's a lot like that. So the thing is that they're going to see it differently than you. The question is, how willing are you to understand their perspective? Now, it doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but are you willing to become a student of them to understand where they're coming from? If you're willing to do that and you truly will understand their position, a lot of times people will soften up, right? Again, you don't always agree, but I think if you're willing to kind of invest and say, how do you see it that way? Or what led you to think that?
Mm-hmm.
People see that as a moment of compassion and grace, and they will often respond in kind. So I think as parents, our job is, how do we best understand our kiddos for who they are, not who we want them to be? That's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
How do we understand their why and their who, right? Because it's probably different than ours. And then where's the common ground? I think for kids with parents, and especially, as we get older, like I think in my generation, when I look at my parents, how do I have grace and compassion for? They did it different than we do.
Well, they had different scenarios. I mean,
Yeah,
what we have and we're dealing with now is a different set of rules, if you want to think
totally.
about it, between technology and virtual abilities for learning. Um, Social dynamics have different risks.
Hmm.
And, it's like, okay, like this does have to have a little bit different framework than when we were growing up.
Yeah, you have to put it in context, right? And so what I see happen a lot of times, and I have done this too, is we do therapy, we do personal growth, we learn about sometimes how unhealthy things were, and then we take that knowledge and we confront parents and say, hey, did you know this was really bad? Okay. And what we expect or hope for, at least what I did, is they would say, hey, thanks so much for pointing it out. Yep, that was terrible. Good call. So sorry. Do most of us react that way when we're confronted? No,
Yeah, you
right?
get defensive because deep down, I feel like we are trying to do our best.
Absolutely. I would say the same thing my parents would have said, which is I'm trying to do it my best. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to read the books, and we'll get it wrong. So I think grace is required, but also clarity is required, and expectations should be discussed.
Okay. That sounded really nice, but that's a lot harder. To
It's
I'm like,
easy. You
way
can
to
do
make it
this.
sound so
You
easy,
can do
Jason.
this. Yeah.
Clarity and expectations. Like, okay, what does that actually look like when you have kids in the home that are
Mm,
still kids, 18 and
yeah.
under? Clarity and expectations. Give me some practical examples of like how you do that in your home or how you teach people to do that in their home.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to tell them what your experience is and how you're feeling. You have to ask the same from them, right? So we want to try to eliminate mind reading. And the reason is that mind reading is really hurtful to kids because as a kid, the whole world is about you. Okay. And so this is why it's kind of cliche, but like when parents would divorce, they'd say, well, the kids always blame themselves. And people say, well, why do they blame themselves? Well, because when you're a kid, that's how you view the world, right? Is if something bad happens, it's your fault. And so the reason that's pervasive is because we don't clearly communicate with kids. Hey, this is the relationship we have. This is what's going on. And so there's a fine line there, right, between sharing and oversharing. But I think we have to be honest and open with our kids, and then we have to let them know what we expect. We also want to understand from them what do they need. And every kid is a little different, right? And their needs change, their wants change.
And I don't know that they would know how to articulate what they need.
That's important skill to learn. It takes practice, right? A lot of the things we think we need, we don't.
And how do you teach them to articulate it?
You try things out. Yeah, so I mean, what we're really trying to do is it's really a relationship lab that we have during childhood. We're going to help them try to figure out how to do it better, so that when they get out of childhood, they've got some good guesses about how to do things well. And so we're going to try things, and so there are boundaries to that. But we might look with the kids. Well, what do you think you need? Well, I need to talk to you, Dad, 3 times a week about school. Okay, well, let's talk about it. And you go, well, I didn't need that at all, Dad. Okay, well, great. Now we know. So what do we think? So what I'm trying to get kids to do is to be creative and identify what they need and want so they don't become adults who try to identify what they need and want.
Can you share with me what we talked about right before we recorded about the two hands?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I try to teach my kids is this idea of thoughts and feelings. And so I'll have them kind of visually hold up one hand in a situation and say, what are your thoughts or the logical things about this situation? And then what are your feelings about it? And then which one do you want to choose? Okay. And what I'm trying to get them to do is just be really aware that thoughts and feelings are present. And we want to separate those out so that we can make the best decision for the situation. Now, an example I use is sometimes my kids will fight and they'll say, well, my thoughts are, I probably shouldn't yell at them or I shouldn't blow up, but my feelings are they deserve it. They have it coming. I really want to do it. And so we'll say, well, which one do you choose? Because if we can learn how to do that skill, that'll take us through our adulthood very well too. And so I just look at being a parent is all about trying to teach kids how to do it well for themselves.
Okay, that is such a great, great tool. I'm just wondering, does Jason have so many more tools and Jody that they do at home when it comes to like just simple examples like that that you help talk through with your kids?
Yeah, one of the other ones we have is every night at supper, we will give the kids, it kind of depends on the night, but a minute or 2 minutes, and they have to fill all the time talking about something on their mind or their day. Okay, and so we'll just set a timer on the phone, and they literally have to fill the time.
They can't
And
just sit there in
they
silence.
cannot just sit there and say they have to do it. And I mean half, like we can't force them, right? But
Right.
the kind of the goal is you fill the time. What's interesting about that is you could almost throw away usually the first half of that because it's just kind of
Filler.
topical. Yeah, it's filler. But that second half is always the good stuff. But to get to the good stuff, you have to give people time to get there. And so what we're trying to do with the kids is help them learn to get to the good stuff. Because otherwise, what they do is they live in a world where it's easy to be kind of shallow because nobody asks for more than that. And so we want them to kind of start to identify like what's running deeper inside me and what's going on there.
What question is your lead in question?
Yeah, I always like to ask what's on your mind and then just pause because it's a great question. Because, one thing I find with people is a lot of people can ask a good question. What they struggle to do is to ask a good question and then give space to answer it. Okay, so what's on your mind lately? And then you say nothing until the other person responds is a great lead in.
Sometimes I've asked, what are your friends dealing with right now?
Mm-hmm.
I've found that they see it easier
Yeah,
to talk in third person, but it's usually their own things that they're dealing with.
totally.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that's good or bad, but
No, that's great. I mean, all those types of questions, and each kiddo will be a little bit different, right? Sometimes I'll ask this is kind of a mean one from a therapist dad, but I'll just say like, what do you think that you should be talking about that I would be interested in hearing? And they'll go, oh, Dad, that's not nice, right? Well,
say it again, Jason, say it again.
what do you think you should be talking about that I would be interested in hearing? Because usually that's the stuff they're holding back, right? Or if you were tempted not to tell me about something, what would it be? Well, I'd probably tell you about, so we'll kind of get there. But what I'm trying to get them to do is to practice some vulnerability and then to see that I'm willing to help them work it out.
And this is in front of the whole
Mm-hmm.
clan at the dinner table.
Yep.
And you've not dealt with that being an issue of them sharing in front of their siblings.
No, I mean, I think we've got some boundaries, right? So if it was something that was really personal or something that I don't think would make sense for everybody else to hear, sometimes it'll be like, well, we'll just talk about that later. Or they'll say to me, like, hey, can we talk later about this? So we're trying to kind of model, like, yeah, not every conversation's for everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
how do we kind of have self awareness to recognize that?
And then what about you and Jody? Do you have a regular check-in question or a routine to
We
stay
do.
connected because you do have a busy schedule as well?
Yeah. So we typically every week, if we can, we get together usually on Friday, sometimes on Saturday, and we just sit down and we go through everything that matters to us: our faith, our family, our finances. We talk about fun. That's one of our big objectives this year was to be more fun. I know it's hard for you to imagine, but we
I
want to be
know
even
you are
more
so
fun.
fun
We
and
want to be more
funny.
fun. So we just say like, how are we doing in these areas? And then kind of what is on my mind, what's on my heart, and where can we connect better? And so I will bring, and Jody always kind of laughs about this, but I'll bring like a note card and I'll outline the conversation because I think conversations that matter require investment and intentionality. And I'll sit down and we'll just go through it. And she'll have hers, and then we'll talk about sort of where are we at today. And sometimes those are hard. Sometimes those are, hey, Jason, you said you were going to X, Y, and Z, and you didn't. Don't like that part, right? Sometimes there's celebrations. Hey, we achieved this milestone. but it's just kind of this constant pulse. And what I'll tell business owners is, here's the good news. You already know how to do a healthy relationship because you do it with your business, right? Could you imagine having a business where you never looked at KPIs? No, you just wouldn't do it. You'd be like, well, that business isn't going to last. Well, neither is your marriage. So you have to have some KPIs in your marriage that you're checking in on frequently.
Wow. So, and how long do you sit down to talk about that?
Usually it's a half hour or less. Yeah. And we try to go someplace fun or get appetizers or do something that it doesn't have to be like this. Well, this is a very serious discussion.
Board
It's
meeting,
just like,
yeah.
yeah, we're on the same team here.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really good routines to get into. And then just with your kids, how do you see it impact? Do you feel like they're just like, okay, the timer's on and they've gotten into the routine now?
They love it. I mean, what's been kind of interesting is they fought it for a long time. You know, they were like, I don't want to do this, Dad. Can't we just watch TV or something? And now it's interesting because they'll go, well, I need all 2 minutes because I got to tell you guys what was going on. And it'll be great. I mean, you think about it, at the end of the day, it's 2 minutes. I mean, this is not like a big ask, but they will fill the space with, well, and then this happened, and then this happened. It's
How
like you
many
start to
days
know
a week
them.
do you feel like you do that?
As many as I'm home. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And they do it if I'm gone sometimes, but yeah, as many as I'm home.
That's so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope for, when you look at your work? This is more of a deep friend question to ask you, but like when you retire one day, what do you really hope for? What does Jason hope for his impact on the work that you're doing to trickle down?
Man, I think the thing that gets me out of bed any day is just to help people do it better and easier. I think the world is hard for so many different reasons. And I just think relationships are really the leverage of that. And so at the end of my life, if I look back and I go like, I help people do relationships better, that's enough. I mean, all the other stuff is great, but that's what I want. And I mean, even, having written the first book, I'll still get messages and people will say, hey, this changed my life. And it's not all about like racking that up, but it's like, wow, can you believe I get to do that? So as long as I can, I want to use my voice to help people with those things.
That's great. So if people want to continue learning from Jason, where would they go?
Yeah, I mean, if you love to hear my voice, you can hear it every day on Instagram. Every day. Jason.VanRuler. You can see me on there. Or my website is jasonvr.com.
Okay, that's awesome. And I'm curious before we hang up, what's the bracelet story? Tell me the story about that bracelet.
I will tell you. So my daughter calls me Dada. And so she is the most crafty, amazing artist ever. And she made me this bracelet. And so I'm just going to wear it till it falls off.
I love it.
But I love it because it's something she made. And so traveling a lot, things like that, it's probably the most important thing I wear.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And for us finally getting to talk about all these things you're working on, because it is such a valuable resource. All those tools you shared, I'm going to implement many of them in my family immediately. And I know that Jordan and I so appreciate some of the wisdom you've shared with us over our friendship and how we can continue to grow closer together. So I appreciate that so much.
And I look up to you so much. I mean, you and Jordan, a lot of the things we're talking about, you guys just do. And you've been that light in my life. So I'm very grateful too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, you guys, make sure you follow along to Something New Show, subscribe, tell your friends about it, and we hope to see you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow the Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.